American travelers, your global freedom may be shrinking. As of mid-2025, several countries are openly criticizing U.S. foreign policy, showing signs of public backlash, or officially considering new restrictions. With fresh U.S. travel bans in place for 19 nations, including full bans on 12 and partial restrictions on 7, more countries are starting to ask, what next? Could Americans soon face passports that aren't welcome everywhere? In this video, we dive into 10 countries most likely to ban American travelers next, based on live data, diplomatic trends, and real-world signals. Let's get into it. Country #1. Cuba. In 2025, U.S.-Cuba relations took a sharp downturn following Donald Trump's executive order reinstating tough restrictions. The order reversed Biden-era easing of travel and commerce and reimposed bans on U.S. tourism, educational trips, and financial transactions with Cuban military-linked businesses. This move infuriated Cuban officials, who viewed it as an aggressive rollback designed to suffocate the island's already fragile economy. Cuba has historically responded to U.S. pressure by clamping down in return, and now Havana is weighing its own travel response. While Cuban visas for Americans are still technically available under limited categories, such as family visits or humanitarian work, officials are reportedly considering tightening those exceptions or even halting them altogether if U.S. policy escalates further. Diplomatic sources say Cuba is also exploring a reciprocal ban as a symbolic protest against Washington's sanctions. It would likely begin with a halt on tourist visas, then potentially expand to business and media travelers. Public sentiment in Cuba has shifted sharply against American influence, with recent state media referring to U.S. restrictions as economic warfare. If tensions worsen, particularly with another wave of sanctions or funding cuts, Cuba may formalize a visa freeze or outright entry ban. In short, 2025 could mark the closest Cuba has come to completely blocking U.S. citizens in decades. Country #2. Chad. Chad made headlines in June 2025 by becoming one of the first nations to retaliate directly against Trump's expanded global travel bans. When the U.S. included Chad in its list of non-cooperating nations over alleged passport and identity verification failures, the Chadian government wasted no time. It suspended all visa issuance to American passport holders, a rare move from an African ally. Chad's foreign ministry stated the suspension was necessary to preserve its dignity and sovereignty. Officials hinted that the policy could soon be expanded into a formal long-term travel ban if bilateral talks with Washington don't improve. This move could set off a chain reaction across West and Central Africa, where several countries feel similarly scrutinized by new U.S. travel restrictions. While the U.S. cited security concerns and immigration risks, many Chadian leaders argue that the ban is politically motivated and unfairly targets weaker states without due process. Chad has also warned it could suspend military coordination with U.S. forces in counterterrorism missions unless the visa issue is resolved. American travelers, including aid workers and contractors, have already faced difficulties securing entry. Given this bold stance and the potential for regional influence, Chad is likely to become a case study in how targeted countries respond to perceived diplomatic humiliation. And Americans could be the ones left grounded. Country #3. Eritrea. Eritrea has long had a tense relationship with the United States, but in 2025, that tension escalated. With Eritrea already among the 12 countries facing a full U.S. travel ban, its government is preparing to return the favor by denying entry to American citizens altogether. Eritrea's leadership has condemned the U.S. ban as neo-colonial discrimination, claiming that it punishes nations based on political bias, not evidence. Eritrea's refusal to cooperate with U.S. identity screening protocols has been cited as the main reason for the ban, but Asmara argues that the issue is sovereignty, not security. Diplomatic communication between the two nations is now nearly frozen. Eritrea has already stopped issuing tourist visas to Americans and is signaling that even humanitarian and academic travel could be halted soon. The bigger issue is symbolism. Eritrea may not receive a large number of U.S. tourists, but an official travel ban would be a powerful statement, especially as anti-American sentiment grows across parts of the African continent. Eritrean officials are also coordinating with regional allies to issue a joint statement of condemnation, and there are whispers of a Pan-African visa pact excluding Americans from certain government-led programs and exchanges. For now, Americans can't travel freely to Eritrea. And in 2025, that line may become permanent. Country #4, Haiti. Haiti is no stranger to political upheaval, but in 2025, the island nation is facing a new kind of crisis, one that could soon include a ban on American travelers. Following Haiti's inclusion in the U.S. 2025 travel ban list, citing humanitarian instability, migration pressures, and weakened border security, the Haitian government has responded with rising frustration. While U.S. policies claim national security concerns, many Haitian officials view the ban as a slap in the face during a time when they're calling for international support, not isolation. Although Haiti hasn't issued an official ban on American travelers, multiple government spokespeople have said the nation is re-evaluating all foreign entry policies and considering visa restrictions on countries perceived as disrespectful or punitive, particularly the United States. U.S. aid and NGO staff are already reporting delays and denials in visa processing. Additionally, public protests in Port-au-Prince and Cap-Haitien have included anti-American slogans, with activists demanding the Haitian government stand up to Washington by halting U.S. tourism. Haiti's fragile government is under pressure from both the street and the international community, and it may soon take a bold, symbolic step. If the U.S. maintains its current stance, Haiti could formally ban or severely restrict American visitors as both retaliation and assertion of national dignity. Country #5. Iran has had one of the most hostile relationships with the U.S. for decades, but in 2025, the conflict is entering a new phase. Following the reinstatement of a full U.S. travel ban on Iranian nationals, Tehran is now moving to block American travelers outright. Already, U.S. citizens cannot obtain Iranian tourist visas through normal diplomatic channels. American passport holders must apply through third-party nations, and even then, approvals are rare. But now, Iranian officials are pushing for an official declaration banning all Americans, including journalists, academics, and aid workers. This shift comes amid increasing tensions in the Gulf region. Trump-era policies have returned, including aggressive sanctions, cyber warfare allegations, and continued support for Israel. Iranian leaders view these moves as acts of economic sabotage and have vowed to respond in kind. State media has begun publishing op-eds calling for complete severance of people-to-people ties with the U.S. and warning citizens against engaging with American entities. The Revolutionary Guard has also tightened surveillance on any remaining Americans inside the country. If this rhetoric turns into policy, Iran will join a growing list of nations actively closing their doors to U.S. citizens. For now, the window to visit Iran as an American is narrow and closing fast. Country #6 Venezuela has long been a hotspot of anti-U.S. rhetoric, but in 2025, its stance toward American travelers is turning from hostile to outright exclusionary. Following Trump's reactivation of sanctions and expanded travel restrictions targeting Venezuelan officials and state entities, President Nicolas Maduro responded with threats of reciprocal measures against American visitors. These threats are no longer just words. Venezuelan consulates in several Latin American countries have halted U.S. visa processing, and American citizens are reporting denials and unexplained delays at ports of entry. Government-aligned media now regularly portrays American tourists and journalists as agents of destabilization, accusing them of spreading propaganda or acting as undercover operatives. Maduro's administration has even launched a review of all visas issued to Americans since 2023, a sign that retroactive revocations could be on the horizon. Venezuela has also strengthened ties with Russia and Iran, forming an anti-U.S. bloc of states that support each other's right to restrict Western access. In this context, a full ban on American tourism would be a politically effective and symbolic move. While U.S. citizens are not yet banned outright, the writing is on the wall. If tensions continue to escalate, Venezuela could soon become completely off-limits to American travelers. Country #7 Sudan. Sudan is facing extreme internal turmoil in 2025, but its diplomatic battle with the U.S. is heating up in parallel, and Americans may soon be banned from entering altogether. After being re-added to the U.S. travel ban list earlier this year due to concerns over terrorism and civil unrest, Sudanese officials called the move an insult to a sovereign nation and accused Washington of fueling instability through selective foreign aid policies. The result? A serious reconsideration of bilateral entry permissions, with a particular focus on restricting American citizens. Although there is no official ban as of mid-2025, Suspension of visas for U.S. passport holders is already underway, and entry denials at Khartoum International Airport are on the rise. Sudan's transitional military government is now under pressure from domestic hardliners who argue that allowing American NGOs and travelers amounts to foreign interference. Sudan has also begun seeking deeper economic and diplomatic support from Russia, China, and the Gulf states, reducing its dependence on U.S. aid or approval. This reorientation, combined with increased surveillance of foreigners, suggests that a full travel ban on Americans could come at any time, especially if conflict deepens. If you're planning to visit Sudan with a U.S. passport, be advised, you may soon no longer be welcome. Country #8, Myanmar, Burma. Myanmar, ruled by a military junta since its 2021 coup, has become increasingly closed off, and in 2025, it's moving closer to formally banning all American travelers. Following the latest round of U.S. sanctions and a reaffirmed travel ban by the Trump administration in June 2025, Myanmar's leadership labeled the U.S. an imperialist provocateur. In response, they've begun heavily restricting visas for Americans, citing national security risks. Even journalists, humanitarian workers, and academic researchers from the U.S. are facing near-automatic rejections or months-long delays. The junta views American presence as a threat to its propaganda control and internal stability. Reports from border checkpoints suggest that U.S. travelers are being flagged, questioned, and in some cases turned back without explanation. Myanmar's Ministry of Immigration has stated it is reassessing bilateral visa reciprocity, which typically signals a coming freeze on inbound travel. Meanwhile, pro-democracy movements have urged the international community to keep pressure on Myanmar, but ironically, Americans on the ground risk being seen as spies or agents of disruption. The military's surveillance of foreigners is escalating, and public sentiment is being shaped by anti-Western narratives. Unless U.S. policy changes drastically, Myanmar could become the next country to enforce a total American travel ban, not just politically, but on the ground. Country number 9, Cuba, again, for its regional influence. Cuba is not just reacting to U.S. policies, it's influencing others. As the anchor of anti-U.S. sentiment in Latin America, Cuba's response to Trump's 2025 travel restrictions may trigger a wider movement across the region, and that could spell bad news for American travelers. Following Washington's reinstatement of strict travel and financial sanctions, Cuba has not only hinted at blocking American visitors, but also invited solidarity from allies like Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Bolivia. Cuban state media has framed the latest round of sanctions as an attack on Latin American sovereignty, and the Cuban government is now pushing for a regional agreement to discourage or block American tourism entirely. This resistance bloc of socialist and leftist governments may begin by issuing joint visa policies, prioritizing South-South travel, and enforcing selective bans or bureaucratic barriers for U.S. passport holders. The broader strategy? Undermine American soft power in the hemisphere. If tourism from the U.S. is seen as a tool of influence or surveillance, countries aligned with Cuba may take collective action, not only in response to American policies, but as a form of symbolic resistance. While Cuba is leading the charge, its influence is spreading. In 2025, U.S. travelers may find more than just Cuba closing its doors. They could face a regional no-entry zone. Country number 10, Laos. Laos may not often make international headlines, but in 2025 it's quietly becoming one of the most likely countries to block American travelers next. Currently, Laos is on the U.S. watch list for travel document and visa enforcement concerns. U.S. immigration authorities have flagged Laos for weak border controls, overstay violations, and poor cooperation on deportation processes. In response, the U.S. introduced new restrictions on Laotian visas, targeting student, tourist, and temporary work categories. Laotian officials have not taken this lightly. A foreign ministry spokesperson recently warned that Laos reserves the right to respond proportionally to unilateral actions, and visa processing for U.S. citizens has already slowed dramatically. NGOs and foreign workers report new red tape, longer wait times, and increased entry denials at Hua-Te International Airport in Vientiane. If tensions continue, Laos could go further by suspending all new visa applications for Americans, a move that would align with its growing partnerships with China and Vietnam. Laos sees the U.S. travel restrictions as unjustified and disproportionate, particularly given its historically neutral diplomatic stance. In a region where geopolitical alliances are shifting, Laos may take a stand, symbolically or politically, by cutting off travel access for American citizens. The decision may come quietly, but the impact will be loud for travelers. These aren't hypothetical. They're rooted in real events. Trump's June 2025 travel bans, global diplomatic tit-for-tats, and surging anti-American sentiment overseas. Countries like Chad have already retaliated, and nations like Iran, Haiti, Cuba, and Venezuela are watching closely. So if you're traveling soon, stay alert. Monitor State Department advisories, respect cultural sentiments, and understand that your passport may no longer guarantee welcome abroad. Which country surprised you most? Let us know below, and share your travel concerns. If you found this useful, subscribe, and share with anyone planning international trips in 2025. Stay informed and stay safe.